And we have some massive, huge breaking news. If you have not heard, Prince Andrew has voluntarily given up his title as Duke of York. Now, there's some specifics that we will still need to get some information on. His daughters will remain titled. Sarah Ferguson can no longer use the title Duchess of York. But this is just absolutely groundbreaking. And it has huge implications for the future of the monarchy. I think, in particular, Harry and Meghan. If they're not worried, they should be, because the pressure is now going to be on them to change up things as well. So we are going to get into some of that. Again, all of this is going to be just an absolutely massive groundbreaking change. So let's go ahead and look at the Times of London piece here. So we get greater context into what this means for Andrew and what means for the royal family overall. So it says Prince Andrew forced to renounce Duke of York title. Andrew will relinquish all titles after his friendship with the late sex offender Jeffrey Epstein threatened to overshadow the reign of King Charles. And this is something that has been long in the offing. Andrew should have done it eons ago, but he was very, very stubborn. But this is a brilliant move by him in many ways, because it was just something that he needed to do. And it just looks really, really bad if you're forced to do it. It looks much better if you voluntarily give it up. So let's go ahead and look at, and we have some information about what this means for Sarah and the girls and everything. So it says Prince Andrew has been forced to relinquish all his titles, including Duke of York and Knight of the Garter, after his friendship with the late sex offender Jeffrey Epstein threatened to overshadow the reign of his brother. I hate it when they sort of do the subtitle and the first sentence are like the same. Anyways, he will remain known as Prince Andrew in accordance with the law first set down by George V in 1917, which stipulates that the son of a monarch can be called a prince. His Royal Highness, HRH, status will remain in abeyance. And a private lease agreement with the Crown Estate means that he can stay at residence in Royal Lodge. So what I think was sort of started to happen here, in particular with Andrew, is he was getting a ton of pressure. And what we haven't talked about is Virginia Giuffre, who tragically took her life earlier this year. She actually has a memoir that is going to be published, I think, next week, if it's not has been published already. And so because of that, that puts even more of a spotlight on him. So this was sort of a natural outcome of all this. So I see a lot of questions about succession, counselor of state. This article does, and this Times is like the Times of London is basically the newspaper of record in the UK. And so it says the titles which Andrew has relinquished included his knighthood as Knight Grand Cross of the Royal Victorian Order and his Garter role as Royal Knight Companion of the Most Noble Order of the Garter. So he has given up all of these. And again, this is going to be a huge blow to his ego, but it's unavoidable at this point. And it's important to say, because this obviously translates to Harry and Meghan as well. He did this to himself. Nobody forced Andrew to do any of this stuff. He did this crap to himself. He was led more by money, so greed, let's say lust, and all those sorts of things, gluttony, whatever, and went along with Jeffrey Epstein. And he was okay for a while, but it was just going to come back out on him. So this is a natural outcome of some very, very poor decision making. And this is how it should happen. And so it says in a press release from Buckingham Palace, so this came out again at about 2:00, in discussion with the king and my immediate family and wider family, we have concluded the continued accusations about me distract from the work of His Majesty and the royal family. So I think this distract is really, really key here for what it means for other members of the family. So if you are a distraction, you sort of need to be dealt with. And not dealt with in a bad way, but just like naturally there has to be consequences to that. So it says, I have decided, as I always have, to put my duty to my family and country first. Okay, he's never really done that much. He's been very much interested in duty to himself and enriching himself. So that's, here and there. And then it goes on to say, I stand by my decision 5 years ago to stand back from public life. And then he goes on to say, with His Majesty's agreement, we feel I must now go a step further. I will therefore no longer use my title or the honors which have been conferred upon me. As I have said previously, I vigorously deny the accusations against me. And again, just for record, Andrew has never been convicted in a court of law of anything. So when it comes to that, it's hard to say, like, I don't want to say, oh, he's guilty and throw the book at him and stuff like that. And he also can't obviously face his accusers because basically his accusers have all died very, and for especially in Virginia's case, very tragically. And not saying that what she said wasn't true or anything like that. We have a lot of accusations, and a lot of them probably hold a lot of water, but it's very difficult to get to the truth here in this particular situation. But he is, basically allowed to say, I denied these accusations. As it says, Sarah Ferguson, Andrew's former wife, will no longer be known as the Duchess of York. So again, this is probably the palace speaking directly to the Times to add a bit more context. Because again, what I'm confused about here is that he says he won't use them, but does that mean he actually gave the titles back to King Charles? Or does he have them and won't use them? That's kind of because we've had that situation before, and that hasn't worked out too well. So again, big question here. And their daughters, Princesses Beatrice and Eugenie, are unaffected. So they will not be impacted by this decision. So their places in the line of succession, their titles. So I would guess, now this is the interesting thing that they don't clarify, but are they still Princess Beatrice of York? Or is it just Princess Beatrice? That's kind of the interesting. Although Princess Alexandra of Kent is still known as Princess Alexandra of Kent. So, and she's obviously been married many years. Obviously, the girls have as well, but it's just sort of an interesting, point of discussion here. And then as we keep going down, it says a source close to the king said that Charles was fond of the princesses and was keen to protect them from the scandals surrounding their parents. Both Beatrice and Eugenie preserve their royal status and titles. And I think that's good. Obviously, I don't think it's fair, and I've always said this. I don't think it's fair to punish the kids for the parents' decisions. Now, again, the question becomes, how much was Beatrice and Eugenie aware of certain things in regards to the financial scandals? I don't think they had anything to do with Epstein, but they were definitely somewhat connected to the financial issues. And obviously, they used a lot of their father's connections for their own business interests. So that is, I think, a huge question. And that's something that still should be, I think, explored. I think in many ways, actually, what's more damaging to the monarchy is Andrew using his status as a special envoy to make money for himself. I think that's a bigger issue. But that's not one, obviously, we're going to discuss right now, but it should be discussed because will this happen again? Will somebody use and again, this comes back to Harry and Meghan, will somebody use their connections to the monarchy to enrich themselves when they're supposed to be representing the UK government? Because that, again, to me, is a huge, huge question about Andrew and one about Harry and Meghan as well. So, and it says the change in Andrew's status, a decision he made in close consultation with the king, comes into effect immediately. Again, I think if Andrew could have avoided it, he would, but the pressure was just too much. And I think they were really looking to take the house, and Andrew didn't want them to take Royal Lodge. I don't quite get why. Like, you can go down to Frogmore Cottage. Who gives a crap? But whatever. Anyways, it says His Majesty was said to be glad of the outcome. It is understood the decision was taken in recognition of Prince of Andrew's personal issues continuing to dominate the royal narrative. Somebody else has that issue as well. The Prince of Wales was also consulted, as were members of the wider family. Buckingham Palace has also made it clear that Andrew will not be permitted to join the rest of the family for Christmas events, although an invitation will be extended to his daughters. While Andrew is still listed as a counselor of state, one of the members of the royal family who can deputize the monarchy in their absence, it has been ruled that he will never be called upon to do so. So they expanded the number of counselors of state to extend to other members of the family. So in particular, the Princess Royal and Prince Edward. And I can't remember exactly like the specifics that they referenced, but basically that can only be with working royals. And if you have to extend that, because obviously Beatrice is wrapped up in that as well. And at some point, of course, they will be sort of moved on from that anyways, once the Wales's kids start having children, and even Harry's kids, to be quite honest. Although I think the Wales's kids having kids will probably knock them down before it's even necessary thing to address. will knock them out of contention for that. So it's just going to be something that will naturally happen. So this is definitely a great move in that direction. But obviously, I'm sure this is in some ways really devastating for the girls. I don't totally blame them for that. And it's just though the natural outcome of Andrew's very, very poor decision making over the years. So we do also have the Telegraph, which basically sort of broke the story. I think they maybe jumped before the embargo, so 1900 hours. So that would be 7 o'clock. So this was coming. So what strictly embargoed means that the newspapers have the information, but they are prevented from saying anything about it until 7 o'clock. So that's what this means if you're not familiar. So this is the actual official statement. And so they said Andrew has agreed to stop using titles, including Duke of York, saying he's always put his family and country first. Again, I don't think that's exactly correct. The development first revealed by the Telegraph following a string of news scandals concerning the royals' relationship with Jeffrey Epstein and his relationship with an alleged Chinese spy. So if you're not familiar with that story, that comes from Pitch with the Palace or Pitch at the Palace or something like that. It was sort of a business operation that he ran where he would try to gather investors and business owners, and so that the business owners can pitch to the investors and that deals can be made so he can wheel and deal. However, if you did get a deal through Pitch at Palace, Andrew actually got a cut of your company. So that was a little hinky as well, but this Chinese guy was involved in that. So if you're not aware of that particular scandal, so we do have the statement as well from Andrew again. So he put all his titles in abeyance. And so I'm still kind of confused as if the king now has those or if he just won't use them. Because again, we've seen where somebody goes, oh, I won't use them, and then still continues to use them. So it says the prince will give up his membership to the Order of the Garter. The prince has also agreed to put his HRH title in abeyance, and his role as counselor of state is inactive as he's not a working royal. So again, they changed counselor of state. You have to be a working royal, and they added more to the roster. So Sarah will also relinquish her title and will simply be known as Sarah Ferguson. And this comes on the heels as well, I should mention. So it's not just Andrew in this particular situation, and why it's actually sort of a big deal for Sarah as well. Because Sarah recently, an email was revealed, and I think actually technically people knew about it in January, but it really only started to get traction now, which is that she publicly denounced Jeffrey Epstein. And then on the side, she sent him an email going, oh, we're still friends. I still like you. I just had to say this to get the press to go away. And she said, I didn't really mean it, basically. And it was sort of, kind of the two-faced hypocrisy thing of her. And so that played really poorly for Sarah. And so she was under the hot seat under Epstein. And then the new email of Andrew basically doing the same thing kind of reignited the question of, should we be allowing this to happen? And yeah, I think right now I did see somebody saying being greedy is never good. Yes. So much of this, especially if you read Andrew Lowney's book on Andrew and Sarah, all of this came from basically greed. Andrew and Sarah both needed money. Sarah was constantly in debt, wildly overspending. And so they were just constantly in need of cash. And again, it's hard to ignore the comparisons to Harry and Meghan. And yes, Harry and Meghan, let's say, are not in a bad place now, but might they be in the future? I think there's a strong possibility that might happen. So let's see if the Telegraph has anything else. The decision was made in close consultation with the King and Prince of Wales. The King was glad, and the change is immediate. So it was, a statement from Prince Andrew. This is kind of a cool thing to reflect. A statement from Prince Andrew rather than Duke of York, because Duke of York is technically a higher title than Prince. Kind of like Duke of Sussex is technically a higher title than Prince Harry. So aides stress that he remains son of Queen Elizabeth II, and therefore the title Prince will still be used. I think that's fine, in accordance with the letters of patent issued by George V. So Beatrice and Eugenie are unaffected. And so until now, the palace had resisted taking such punitive action, but felt its hand had finally been forced. Aides are aware that there's likely a far more revelations to come concerning Andrew's relationship with Epstein, late pedophile and financier. The change in tact also comes after the Telegraph revealed on Thursday that the prince had had meetings with Kai Qi, the top Chinese official at the center of the Beijing spy case, on at least 3 occasions from 2018 to 2019. He also invited him to Buckingham Palace for lunch in 2018. And then we go down, it says, just previously leaked emails showed that Prince Andrew stayed in touch with Epstein longer than he had claimed, raising questions about what else he may have lied about. So he said in his Newsnight interview in 2019 that he had cut off contact with Epstein in December of 2010, but just days after, a photograph was published in 2011 showing Prince Andrew with his arm around Virginia Giuffre, the late sex trafficking victim. He contacted Epstein to express concerns for his welfare and adding that they were in this together. So, and it basically validates that this picture is true. Some people have tried to spin it that this picture is not real. It is real. So Mr. Kai, who is at the heart of a collapsed spy case and one of the most senior members of the Chinese Communist Party, is a close ally of Xi Jinping, Chinese president. He's understood to be at the final recipient of sensitive information allegedly passed to China by Christopher Berry and Christopher Cash, the 2 British nationals accused of spying for Beijing. Revelations concerning his relationship with Prince Andrew emerged just months after it was emerged that Andrew had forged a close friendship with Yang Tengbo, a suspected Chinese spy who inserted himself into the highest circles of the British establishment. So that I might be getting these 2 guys maybe mixed up. So I do apologize for that. High Court ruled that Mr. Yang had formed an unusual degree of trust with the prince, having been invited to the royal birthday party in 2020 and having helped set up Chinese brands of Prince Andrew's pitch at Palace. Okay, so Mr. Yang was the particular guy. Prince Andrew met Mr. Kai at least 3 times, both in London and Beijing. So this is another potential Chinese spy Andrew was attached to. Just days ago, royal aides were suggesting that they had done all they could to punish the errant prince. The removal of titles considered a step too far, despite public support for the move. Andrew has already been stripped of his military titles and charity affiliations and is banned from using his much-cherished HRH honorific. So this again changes the game. It changes the game completely for what it looks like for Harry and Meghan. Because with Andrew voluntarily giving up his titles, he is doing the thing that I have argued needs to be done. And this is not just an Andrew issue. This is an all over royals issue, which is to separate members of the family who are no longer working, who are dragging down the entire system from actual working royals. And this is just so incredibly important. This is just like any company. Let's say if you are running a huge brand, let's say Target, and then you have a competitor named Target who also has a bullseye for a logo, but it's, blue instead of red, and it's basically copying everything you're doing, but doing it in a cut rate way, or basically swindling people or something like that. You stop the brand damage by sort of getting rid of and gobbling up the competition. This is how businesses run. I realize the palace is not that, but it is in some ways as well. And so the issue with Andrew is that he was so damaging to the brand of the monarchy that you had to get rid of him to preserve everything else, because everything he's done. And you have to actually, I think I have to give a shout out to Andrew Lowney too, who was great to interview on this topic, because his book came out, more came out about Sarah, then we get the Andrew thing, and then these titles. And I think it just reinvigorated why people don't like the Yorks, why they don't trust them, and why this was a necessary step. They are dangerous to the monarchy. They are damaging to it because they're not run by logic. They're not run by, I think, respect for the institution, them internally in their decision making. They're motivated by greed, both of them, Andrew and Sarah. I think for different avenues, Andrew does want the money, but Sarah is constantly in debt and always needs money, and always needs somebody to bail her out. And I got to give her credit. She's really, really great at sort of coming up with a new hustle quite a bit. And she's sort of done the same hustles, but they've created a situation where it's just, they could have lived just fine, being quiet, even with the Jeffrey Epstein connection, let's say, they could have lived quietly away, done their things, whatever. But the association was so bad, and it came up again and again and again. And it wasn't just like a lot of famous people have had brushes with Jeffrey Epstein, is that even when all the bad stuff came out about Epstein, Andrew was still attached to him. Andrew still wanted to be friends with him. And that was, I think, the crux of the issue is that even when everybody else in the world was going, this guy is bad news, everybody else stepped away and Andrew somehow wanted to get closer. And obviously, it's led him to ruin. So, what does this mean, obviously, for Harry and Meghan? Because Harry and Meghan, although they have different tracks, and you can say they've done everything pretty like well at this point, there's a big question for them, I think, in the future, which is that what will they do to make money? Because we've seen they have big, healthy appetites for cash. Meghan needs a lot of expensive trinket jewelry. She wants more Hermes coats. I'm sure she wants an Hermes Birkin. And so she needs to drop a lot of cash at Hermes. She shops a lot at Cartier. And they want to take private jets, although they've been kind of forced to take passenger jets recently, which I find kind of funny. And so they are constantly wanting cash, wanting to be connected to famous people. And like, Meghan was just seen at a event with Emma Grede. And Emma Grede has a lot of money because Meghan, of course, is always following the cash, always wanting to, yes, she's trying to make her own money. But the damage comes to the fact that Meghan at this point has yet to establish that she is anything other than a woman with a title who has a side hustle. Everything about Meghan at this point, all the agreements, all the business, everything is tied to the fact that she is the Duchess of Sussex and nothing else. Harry and Meghan have yet to rub two creative brain cells together to show that they have an ounce of creative talent in an industry that is dying, by the way. Hollywood is dying. In fact, ironically, most of the productions are freaking moving to the UK, the place they hate, because you can save a lot of money by going to the UK. Producing in Los Angeles has become wildly expensive, ridiculously expensive because of all the union requirements, all the state requirements. You have to have like a ceremony for, if some indigenous people at some point own this particular set of land, even though now it's a strip mall, you still have to, pay your respects to it. It's gotten insane. So all of Hollywood productions are moving out of town and the industry itself is dying. And Harry and Meghan are attached to the only winner in this game, which is Netflix. But Netflix is also spending millions, if not billions, on loser properties sometimes. And so they will run out of cash at some point if they're not careful. And if they don't figure out a way to sort of diversify enough of their assets, obviously they're trying. But Harry and Meghan, I think, will go to anyone who gives them cash. And that's the danger there. I think Meghan has a bit more of a head on her shoulders than Andrew and Sarah do in this particular circumstance. But I wildly see a possibility of Harry and Meghan stepping in it, much like Andrew and Sarah. I 100% see that possibility in the future. Harry and Meghan would be horrified by that idea because I think, especially Harry hates his uncle and does not want to become his uncle. But sometimes in the process of not becoming somebody, you actually do become them because you're not really taking the lessons that this person has experienced. And so when it comes to the titles for Harry and Meghan are also doing brand damage like Sarah and Andrew because Meghan is trying to influencerize her royal title. And that just makes it cheap. It makes it tacky. And you just had to look at her recent Instagram to see that because my mom was sort of horrified because she's like, all she's doing is showing off her wealth. And I'm like, yeah. I mean, influencers do that, but I feel like influencers who are not so like focused on that side give you a side that's sort of interesting. Meghan at this point, all she's showing us is, ooh, look, I'm uber wealthy. And ooh, look, I get to go to these events. And aren't I special? Well, you were special when you were standing on the balcony of Buckingham Palace. Now you're just like basically any other influencer. And some of them have more followers than you do and are more successful than you are and have more interactions than you do. And she and Harry are damaging the royal brand. And the same steps must be taken. Yes, I agree. The damage is being done in very different ways. Andrew, obviously, it's a moral question 150%. Andrew's morality, his decision making, and all these things are reflecting bad on the institution. But Harry and Meghan's are in a different way as well. And they are cheapening the monarchy to such an extent. Again, it's like I have a little Coca-Cola bottle here because I find these fun. But The Coca-Cola bottle. If there was another Coca-Cola brand that had a white background and red lettering and used a K instead of a C, Coca-Cola would destroy it in like 5 seconds because it's brand damage. Harry and Meghan are doing the same thing, and the same decisions need to happen. And with Andrew voluntarily doing it, it raises the question of, shouldn't Harry and Meghan do the exact same thing? Shouldn't Harry and Meghan make the really smart decision here to let go of the royal titles and just be Harry Sussex and Meghan Sussex? He can still technically be Prince Harry. He will always be Prince Harry. I've never said he should lose that. But I mean, I guess it becomes a question then because they can't really use Sussex if he's no longer the Duke of Sussex. But I don't know. Maybe some compromise can come. But Harry and Meghan are also doing a lot of damage, and they're a lot more active. I mean, Andrew, at the very least, shut up for the last, 6, 7 years since basically the Nightline interview or night, whatever that interview was. And so he is shut up, which I think has helped him immensely. Harry and Meghan have not shut up. And they're constantly using their royal titles. They're constantly using it in commercial endeavors. And that's not what the monarchy is, and it's not what it should be doing. And as a result, they are immensely damaging it. And so because of that, steps should be made, much like Andrew. But because Andrew voluntarily gave it up, now the pressure becomes Andrew has now been taken care of. This is a danger for Harry and Meghan. Andrew has been taken care of largely. He's taken care of himself. He's extricated himself from the game. So now all the pressure becomes what to do about Harry. What to do about Harry's titles when Harry goes to the UK and basically does a pseudo royal tour as if he's still royal. No, he shouldn't be doing that. The palace needs to stop that from happening. And so how the palace does that, I think, reflects greatly on King Charles's legacy in the future. How does he deal with this? They managed to finally pressure Andrew enough to let it go, but Harry should be fearful because now all the attention will move over to him. Andrew was kind of this distraction in the corner. And when I've said, oh, Harry should have his title stripped and so should Andrew, or I just say Harry should have his title stripped. But what about Andrew? I was like, oh, Andrew too. Like, I don't really care. And then, but now with Andrew walking away, I was like, well, Andrew walked away. Harry should walk away too, because it's not just about the brand damage and everything, but Harry left, lit the store on fire as he walked out the door, whistled while he worked, and then complained somehow we are responsible for the fire, or the royal family was responsible for the fire, when he was the one having a campfire in the middle of the store and let the embers go wild or whatever. It doesn't work. So, for the future continuity of the monarchy, Harry does need to be dealt with in the same way. And he should be shaking in his boots that this finally happened to Andrew, because the question was, well, how do we deal with this and everything? Now we have dealt with it. Now Charles can go to Harry. It's like, well, your uncle did this. You should do this too. This helps me. Don't you want to help your father? All these sorts of things. Now the screws are going to be turned to Harry and Meghan. And every time they use their titles, they're going to be looked at again and again and again. Why are you using these? Why can't you just go by Harry and Meghan? Why do we have to do this? Why does everybody have to? Why do you have stationery with flipping HRH on it? And I do think because the kids are not raised in the UK at all, they have no UK connection basically whatsoever, that this should also extend in the different case to the York girls. This should be extended to Harry and Meghan's kids as well, because they live in California. They have no connection to the monarchy. This needs to be addressed publicly, and or not publicly, I guess, but this needs to be addressed, and this needs to be prevented from going sideways in 20 to 30 years, because who knows where Harry and Meghan's kids are going to end up at this point. I don't have a ton of hope. I worry about them, what they might do with their titles and everything, walking around LA going, I'm Prince Archie, which is still a terrible name. I hate the name Archie for a kid. Sorry. It's one of those things I'm just not a fan. So sorry. But it reminds me of Archie from the Archie comics. And it like feels so on the nose because her kid has red hair. So I'm going to name him Archie. I'm like, really? Anyways, so You don't want these kids walking around with titles because with titles, walking around without, let's say, the umbrella, and it doesn't, then this is not a bad thing to have an umbrella. There should be a standard of conduct within the monarchy. And I think technically there probably is somewhere, but this needs to be set in stone. There's a standard of conduct. If you operate outside that standard of conduct, which I think particularly should be punished, is commercializing royal titles to make money. Because again, that cheapens the monarchy. It calls it into disrepute. So many different things. There must be a way to address this. It should have been with Andrew. It should be for anyone who is abusing their titles in order to get ahead. And yes, because you have a royal title, yeah, you might get a leg up in a business or in a job or something like that. You can't avoid that, especially if you're born royal. But if you are abusing it, if you're using it in ways that I feel like damage and undermine the monarchy, that should be something that's dealt with in the most severest form possible. And for Harry and Meghan, that means stripping the titles. And again, if I was them, I'd be shaking in my boots that this Andrew nuisance or distraction, because again, when I've debated with people online or whatever, they're like, but what about Andrew? What about Andrew? But now Andrew's taking himself out of the game. So now it just becomes, what are Harry and Meghan going to do? And the thing is, I would have so much more respect for Harry and Meghan if they voluntarily did this, because I have more respect for Andrew. Yes, do I think he was immensely pressured? Yes. But was this the right move to make? Yes. Will it reflect good on him to do so? Yes, I do think it will. And actually, it's a kind of a boon for him in just his public relations. He's like, I had this title, but I gave it up, everybody. I did the right thing. Harry and Meghan not doing the right thing. And they should follow the Andrew approach, because now it becomes, you guys should follow the Andrew approach. And I thought from the beginning, like being quieter like Andrew, it works. And Harry and Meghan abusing it, calling herself Duchess of Sussex on everything, having bags, having mats, having pins for their staff, for Pete's sakes, having and pins, I mean like lapel pin, as if they're diplomats. Because again, if you're not familiar, in certain situations like diplomats or businesses or whatever, they'll have a little lapel pin they'll have people wear as they walk around a particular event or what have you, to represent who they are. It's like, that's idiotic. They're just two people with a fair amount of money who happen to have royal titles. They don't have any diplomatic powers whatsoever. They represent nothing but their own bank accounts. And that's the thing. Being royal should mean something, even if you have a private job. If you are royal, you should respect your institution enough. And I feel strongly that a lot of them do, that they don't want to pull it into disrepute because they respect the institution, their family enough to operate accordingly. But people who don't, like Harry and Meghan, like Andrew and Sarah, the ultimate punishment in this case, which is removing the titles, should be the route forwards. And so I think the next to come under this sort of umbrella of pressure is going to be Harry and Meghan, because the thing is, they let Andrew go on for too long. And it was just scandal after scandal after scandal. Now, Harry and Meghan have done better about not slamming on the royals, but they do it more in like barbs and issues and various things. So for me, at least I would say for the future, the best thing to do would be for the pressure to be on now, because you don't want to deal with the problem down the road, because this will be a problem down the road. I can almost 100% guarantee it. I can almost 100% say there will be an issue with Harry and Meghan down the line that's just not going to work. It's not going to work. And so I think this is something to watch for sure. I'll be interested to see how things sort of flip around and move around, because we don't know quite what the next move will be. But King Charles has had these attempts to reconcile with Harry. And I have said this always, and I still agree, that for a personal reconciliation between father and son, I don't really think anybody should stay in the way of that. But what are Harry's motivations? Because he claims he just wants to reconcile with his father. He's left his security issues behind him. And then he's lobbying the government directly, because this is a thing Andrew hasn't done. Yes, Andrew might have been involved in criminal activity 150%, but Harry is actively involved lobbying the government for a very personal reason that does not help the people at all. It's just merely to help Harry and his family and nobody else. Royals should not be doing that, especially one who is constitutionally irrelevant. Again, I've said this before, I'll say this 1,000 times. Harry simply, by leaving the monarchy, sped up the inevitable when it came to his security issues. His security was always going to be pulled, guys. At some point, he would never have gotten 24/7 security after a point. That would have been taken away from him as it was for his uncles and aunt. That's just a reality of being the spare. And Harry seems to somehow think that he's more important than basically everybody else in his family. And that's just simply not the case. And so this future for him is looking pretty bleak at this point, because Harry's and Meghan's biggest problem in their Hollywood careers, which are, again, pretty dismal at this point. They have yet to have a hit beyond just simply ragging on his family. With Love Meghan, you could argue was maybe a mediocre success at best. Season 1, season 2 catastrophically flopped, like flopped hard. I actually a whole article on it in Substack talking about how in the case of Netflix, Meghan was in actually the top 10 countries of quite a few. I want to say it's 20 something. She did not make a single top 10 country at all for season 2. And so that's a huge catastrophic fall, which basically meant everybody from season 1 did not want to watch season 2. Or in my theory, everybody just wanted to watch the Mindy Kaling tantrum, and then they dropped off. And Harry and Meghan have yet at any point to prove they have a talent beyond having a royal title. They're not good producers. They're not good creatives, as far as we can tell. Meghan can do calligraphy, what she calls calligraphy. I call it fancy cursive. Meghan can write fancy cursive. Harry can, speak nonsense for money. That's basically their skill set at this point. And they've relied on their royal titles so much to get them anywhere, and relied on his family so much to get anywhere. Number one, if they're making reconciliation efforts, are they doing that because he wants a relationship with his father, or are they doing that because they need money? Because the only thing, again, that made them money is his family and the connection to his family, and that is it. So without that connection, what do they have? They have made, I think, the catastrophic error of proving they could do anything beyond labeling everything, I'm the Duchess of Sussex or the Duke of Sussex. Pretty much Meghan, though. So nothing she could do beyond just having, I mean, she would put Meghan, but she would always also say Meghan, Duchess of Sussex, in the titles and the captions and all these sorts of things. And I feel like that, number one, to a lot of people is really, really grating, because it's like, okay, we know you had this bit part on Suits, but you were never an Academy Award level actress by any stretch of the imagination. I've watched some of her stuff. Honestly, I think she's a horrible actress, like truly awful. And she couldn't get anything else. And Harry was her thing. But a royal title is not a magic wand. It doesn't imbue you with talent you didn't have before. And unfortunately for Harry and Meghan, they just don't have a lot. And I already think we're seeing a bit of the panic and a bit of the reshuffle and Meghan relaunching, because without that deal with Netflix, the money's not going to roll in as it was. Harry got a lot of money, I think, from his book, but I'm sure that has dwindled quite a bit as well. So they have to look for something else. And unfortunately, the monarchy might be on the chopping block for them. And that's the big risk here, is that once again, it'll become Meghan's going to do a memoir. Oh, what is Meghan going to do in the memoir? Oh, she's going to say what the alleged royal racist told her. And who knows if it's true? We have no clue. I would argue it's not true, but they've done a lot of damage. They've claimed the royals are racist. They've claimed they weren't accommodating to Meghan and her alleged psychological needs, which I don't agree were true. And so she's done that already. Now, if the coffers get lower and lower and lower, what will she do? How will she elevate and embellish the story? Because we've actually seen a track record of this. And this is really interesting because this just came to mind. So this just happened. I'm just a little all over the place, maybe a little bit. But what's actually really interesting is that Meghan's soap story, she's told us this, I want to say it's 50 times. It's not. But we've heard this story, I want to say at least a good 5 solid times at this point. We heard it at South by Southwest. We've heard it in the UN speech. We've heard it in the documentary. We've heard it in her Bloomberg interview. And feel like we've heard it recently as well, or whatever. We've heard this story numerous times. But in the Bloomberg interview, which was the latest iteration, she added another level to it. She elevated the story because now it was all happening during the LA riots. So now we have this tension because, oh, our parents couldn't get back to us to pick us up because of the LA riots. So we were watching the riots on the TV. Now, depending on how young they were, why were they watching the LA riots on the TV? That just doesn't seem very smart. Although I did actually grow up in Southern California, and they literally announced the O.J. Simpson verdict over the loudspeaker of my freaking elementary school. That is 100% a true story. I remember exactly where I was on the playground when that happened. Very strange. Anyways, so because of that, it's like, okay, so she's told the story so many times. Now she has to add another element to it. So was that element already always there? Or is she conflating two events? Or is she making something up to make it more dramatic? Because she's told the story so many times at this point. Oh, I have to add another thing to it. And this is the danger if Meghan Markle does a book about her time within the royal family and everything, which I'm sure is probably on the pipeline of things starting getting super bad, which is that we're going to embellish what may be an innocent comment. At the very least, let's say we give her the benefit of the doubt, and somebody made a very innocent comment to her about what Archie might look like in the future, like any family does, speculating about who the kid will look like or whatever. Meghan twists that into something racist, which it never was. But now it's become worse over time. And she's going to do it again and again and again. And so that's the danger here. And this is why, again, the issue of Harry and Meghan must be addressed. You can't just let it linger. It's only going to get worse because Harry and Meghan, as we've seen with Andrew and Fergie, have the same issue, which is that they need and want cash. And they don't want, the thing is, guys, Harry could have bought a huge plot of land. Harry and Meghan could have bought a huge plot of land somewhere probably in Northern California or in somewhere else throughout the United States and in more of a rural area and lived probably very private lives. They've chosen a very public life. They've chosen a very expensive location, and they've chosen a world that requires competition. Keeping up with the Joneses goes up to 11 in California. So they're going to spend money just to compete with their peers, to look like they're being as successful as everybody else. So they're going to live a billionaire's lifestyle on a millionaire's salary. And you want to bet bottom to dollar at some point that's going to start to come back and bite them in the butt, because I don't think they have many good things going forwards. One of the things, Meghan's ads ever business, I don't think that thing is going to succeed. It looks pretty bad at this point. If I'm going to be perfectly honest, it doesn't look like a business that's going to do very well in the future. And so it's going to get, I think, worse for the royals rather than better. And that's why it's, I think, very good in a lot of ways to address this issue. Address it now. Fix it now before it becomes a massive problem down the line. And with Andrew having voluntarily made this step, it becomes so much easier for the pals to put pressure on Harry and Meghan to do the same. And I don't think Harry and Meghan will take very well to it because they know they have nothing without those titles. They have nothing. And yeah, their businesses might still go on, and not everything is connected to the titles, but so much of their business is tied to being royal in California. And I think they're diminishing what it means to be royal and confusing people about what it means to be royal because they tell a lot of, in my personal opinion, a lot of lies. A lot of them can be proven to be absolute lies. Some of them you can't totally prove, but we were married 3 days before our wedding by the Archbishop of Canterbury. No, he says that's not true. Archie was denied, I think she said, a title because of his skin tone and kind of tied security into that. But no, he wasn't entitled to a title when he was born. He was the great grandson of the monarch, not the grandson of the monarch. Big, big difference. And he's not the son of the Prince of Wales or son of the future Prince of Wales. Huge, huge contradiction, huge clarifications there. And I know there's other things over the years, but those are the two ones that always come to mind. But because of that, you can't, I think, rely on Harry and Meghan to be good narrators and good kind of reflections of what it means to be royal. And so the royal family has to decide itself, what does it mean to be royal? And if these people aren't following the guidelines, it just needs to be dealt with. And I see here, JJ, what press release Sarah's just Sarah Ferguson. So she can use the title Dutch. She could for a long time, and she did use the title Duchess of York, but now it's been taken away. So she can no longer use that. And I think that should be same with Harry and Meghan. They should not be allowed to use Duke and Duchess of Sussex. That should be gone. And they should just live as Prince Harry and Meghan Markle. And I don't think there's anything that terrifies Meghan more than just simply being Meghan Markle again. I think she lives in fear of that because Meghan Markle wasn't all that successful. Again, I've argued, if you've never been to my channel before, I've argued for a long time that actually a lot of Meghan's suits money went to paying for PR. And so because of that, she didn't actually have that much entering into the marriage because so much of her money was wasted on PR. So instead of her just simply doing good work, she paid to get in front of people so she could be seen doing good works. Huge, huge difference. So guys, that is the update on Andrew. I think for Sarah, for Sarah, it's obviously looking rather bleak for her as well. And the Beatrice and Eugenie, I think the cloud of their parents will always hang over them. Of course, as well, I think that Andrew and Sarah, like, I think they have probably influenced their daughters in some negative ways, but I still think overall, mostly, I would say they're fine. They're not really the big issue. Mom and dad are. But mom and dad now are basically ostracized from the royal life. And I think this is a step that should be extended to Harry and Meghan as well. And I think it's something that they should decide to do themselves rather than it being forced upon them. But I sort of don't really have much doubt that that will happen. I think Harry and Meghan will be the ones to force their own hands here. So it's a huge change, a huge breaking news. I actually should look, guys, because I haven't looked too much because we've been discussing all of it. If there's any other big news here and about Andrew or anything, but I don't see anything super new. But of course, if something comes up, I will let you all know. But this is, I think, for Harry and Meghan, they're quaking in their boots. I just have no doubt that they're quaking in their boots. And yes, Andrew will remain at Royal Lodge. He probably has a decent amount of money hidden around somewhere with all his sort of nefarious wheeling and dealing. So I don't think he's a pauper, but it's definitely changing the game quite a bit. Changing the game. And again, I think it's something Harry and Meghan could do, and it would be a really, really great thing for them to do. I think in so many ways, I think it would play so much better for them than just constantly like putting DS on a Longchamp bag for Duchess of Sussex or having a Christian Dior bag that says DSSOS, Duchess of Sussex on it. Like, don't be that level of patheticness.